Well, good morning, Harbour Youth, or g'day. I don't know when you're watching this. This is Tom Batty here, and today we are continuing to look at Hebrews. And today we're asking the question: how is it that I can approach God? Have you ever thought about that? How can you have confidence to approach God on His throne? So, let's open up Hebrews chapter 4, and I'll line this up for you. Looks like you can see that there. And it says, Hebrews 4:14 to 16. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to feel sympathy for our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, and yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. How is it that we can approach God? It says that we can do it with confidence. I reckon that's crazy. Like, just considering the idea of walking up to God boldly, like having confidence to do that. And I think the only reason that we're able to do that is because we have mercy and grace in Jesus. Okay? Do you understand the difference between mercy and grace? Because they are different, and you need to know this. Now, mercy is when you don't get something that you do deserve. So if you're annoying and your brother should punch you but he doesn't, that's mercy. Does that make sense? You deserve to get it but you didn't, and so that's mercy. But if you're annoying and your brother should punch you and he gives you a piece of cake, then that's grace. That's getting something that you don't deserve. So that's the difference. Mercy is missing out on something that you do deserve, and grace is getting something that you don't deserve. And they're different. Now, when I was in year 7, I discovered that I needed mercy from God. I remember it was probably about this time, early March, maybe late February, and I was sitting at school in the Christian group, and the guy that was talking to us was telling us how every one of us, because of our sin, because of our rejection of God, deserve punishment from Him. And I was feeling that acutely because I'd been running away from God. I'd been rejecting Him. And I remember the guy that was speaking, he kind of looked up into the clouds behind and said, you know, at any one point, God could get His big old thumb from out of the clouds and could just pierce it straight through and squish us right here because we've rejected Him. That's what we deserve. And I remember feeling at that moment, yeah, I deserve punishment, but please, Lord, will you forgive me? And so that was the moment that I became a Christian, when I asked for mercy from God. But the cool thing is, as a Christian, we don't just get mercy, because you can see how if we only had mercy, that would only take us halfway. If my sins were no longer punished because they were taken, they were atoned for, they were dealt with by our great high priest, then that only gets me to be able to stand before God neutral with no sins. I'm still not friends with Him. I'm still not invited in. And so the question is, how do we get more than just mercy from Jesus? How do we get grace? And I think it's all to do with that line where he says, we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven. See, the fact that Jesus is our great high priest means that He's paid for our sins. Our mercy is dealt with. But that He goes into heaven means that because He is the same as us, He shares flesh and blood, we are brother with Him. He's our brother. That means He stands up in heaven and He calls us forward to be with Him. We're not just standing before God neutral, we're invited in to the dinner table of the King. And that's only because Jesus has already ascended into heaven. And so that means, for us, we can approach God with confidence, knowing that in Jesus we have both mercy and we have grace. And so I think this raises a couple of questions for us. One of the big ones is, what if I still don't feel confident to approach God? That's a big one, and that's worth discussing in discussion groups later on at youth this week. The other question is, does this make sense? Does it make sense why Jesus has to be both high priest and our brother in order for us to be saved? Alright, catch you on Friday.